Welcome, everyone, to the Unemployable Podcast. I am your host, Sam Cottle, and here we talk about all kinds of things. And being unemployable is not being unemployed. It means that you're going all in on yourself and not all in on what your boss, your culture, your family, or someone else expects from you. Being unemployable is taking ownership of your future, your success, your opportunities, your happiness. Today, I have a very special guest, Rich Helppie, here with us. Rich and I actually met through my YouTube channel about the Tampa area. So this is like a marketing channel I've talked a lot about on previous episodes. Rich and I became friends really easily because there's something about us that is deeply similar. A few things, actually. Growing up in small town America, blue-collar environments, but then also just being naturally born entrepreneurs that never really fit in. That's just a way we interact with the world. So I'm so excited that Rich is here. He has a storied business history all the way back to being a kid working in the Doritos factory to being a top-performing NASDAQ company leader. Thank you, Rich, for joining us today.
It's fun to be here, Sam. It's a little weird being on this side of the microphone, but we'll do the best we can.
Yeah, so Rich also has a very successful podcast, really kind of news-focused, current event-focused, really digging into what is actually happening, not what the common narrative is. So we'll get into that project as well, because I love that you're doing that you're so focused on that. But Rich, tell us a little bit about you, kind of your upbringing, and then kind of what pushed you into business and kind of where that led.
Grew up in a blue-collar part of Detroit, just 12 miles outside the city limits of Detroit, straight down Michigan Avenue. Public schools. I like to say that my public schools were funded by the two Ford plants there in town.
Yeah.
And it was actually a great time to grow up. Baby boomers, the communities were focused on getting behind the kids, in every way possible. And part of that was making sure that we had vocational education, whether it was auto shop or other trades like that. And there was a class in high school, for example, built a house every year. Now, I didn't go down that path, but the computers for the school system were at the high school. And so they said, let's teach these kids how to program computers.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed doing that. It turned out I had at least a nominal talent for it. And that led to my career in computer systems. But again, I was a typical blue-collar kid. I bussed tables when I was 13, washed a lot of dishes, short order cook and assistant manager in a restaurant at 15.
Wow.
Had a window washing business, so kind of a taste of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
As you said, I was working in the Dorito factory on the Dorito line in the summer of 1974 when I had a chance to take an aptitude test for a computer programming job. And that led me to being hired by the R.O. Polk Company. And, that started a career in computer systems, which led to being an entrepreneur and starting things up.
Yeah. What did computer programming look like and feel like back in the 70s?
Well, compared to today, it's like, I don't know, chiseling in stone or something.
Yeah.
It was, the way I put it like this, it used to take us like 3 years and 100 people to put up a major application. Then the client server came in and it took 50 people in a year. And now it's like 2 guys in an afternoon can put up something.
Yeah.
It's that rate of change and that pace of change that I've been able to witness, and actually to be, both a participant in and an investor in and a corporate leader in, is how to apply those technologies and put them to use inside a business, and also to help other people learn how to use them.
Yeah, so not just how to build them, but how to practically apply them in an industry that seems like it's functioning okay, right?
Well, it's never okay, because in technology, during the time we're having this conversation, somebody can leapfrog you.
Right.
The cadence in technology is incredibly fast.
Yeah.
I think this is why capitalism is such a good thing. The creative destruction in capitalism means that we're continually improving. And think about when the compact disc was the avant-garde medium. All
Yeah.
right, that is so passé. Netflix has stopped shipping the video disc in their little mailers because you don't need to do that anymore because of the
Yeah.
technology infrastructure. And that's been kind of the story of entrepreneurs. And I was fortunate enough to form a company that, because we didn't have capital, but we were computer nerdy enough, used the new technologies at the time to lever into a different business model, and force the established players to chase us and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
change their business models.
There's a lot of voices in business always, but a very big one right now is a young man, actually my age, 33, named Alex Hormozy. And he talks about this thing a lot. He says the number one rule in entrepreneurship is to use what you've got. And it seems like you really did that with that company you started when you were 30. You went to your wife, said, hey, I know we only have this much in savings, but I really want to do this. And she got behind you. Of course she did. She loved it, wanted you to be happy, wanted you to go for it. But tell us a little bit about what that felt like. And of course, it's easy to have kind of rose-colored glasses looking back at it, right?
Well, like I was 28 years old
Okay,
actually,
28.
and not very very far past my 28th birthday, a matter of weeks. And I was working in a health system. I had made a conscious decision to learn healthcare, and healthcare was always a bit behind in computer systems. And I was watching some of those trends, and I spotted an opportunity. And this is one of the keys to entrepreneurship: is can you bring value?
Yeah.
And later on in my career, as I began counseling other companies and investing in other companies, oftentimes my first question is, why does this company need to exist? And I'm listening. Have you articulated something that a customer wants to buy?
Right.
So we saw a need to provide basically the labor component for a lot of system change, both through the technical integration and the workflow integration, and figured out a way to do it better, faster, and cheaper than the alternatives on the market. So the first thing, when I talk to entrepreneurs is, can you bring value? How are you serving your customer? What's the
Yeah.
need out there?
Right.
And then to your point about use what you've got, a good entrepreneur is a synthesizer that says,
Yeah. Yeah.
something's happening over here. Something's there. Here's a trend here. Here's how I can put these together. You tend to see the future in a different way. You look at what's working, what's not working. How can I be better? What are the available tools today? What established players are stagnant, and how can I eat their lunch?
Oh my gosh, all this is so good. I'm so excited to talk about real estate as we get further
Yeah,
into.
well, we're going to talk about real estate, which is a different business, completely different cadence.
Yeah.
But in building Superior Consultant, if we were not the first, we were among the first. I don't know of any other company in 1984 that was issuing mobile computers to their workforce, and
Yeah.
that was using a groupware that we kind of manufactured on our own, and
Sure.
some Salesforce systems that we had cobbled together. And we weren't playing by the old rules. And most of our competition was coming from the consulting arms of the large accounting firms, and they would boast about the number of offices they had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we would say, well, great, you want to pay for the offices. We don't need those because we're using technology. And we have an all senior staff. They have an all junior staff.
Right.
We'll get it done, and we're going to get it done for a lesser price point. By the way, anything that we advise you on, we can help you implement. So
Right.
we forced all those companies to change their business model. And today it's, everybody does it that way. But at
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
time in ancient business history, it was different.
But let's go back to, so you start this company, you've got this idea. What was but you got like a contract, right?
No, I quit my job because I saw the opportunity. And that was a story you're starting to talk about my beloved wife.
Yeah.
We had 2 kids under the age of 4. She was pregnant with the third one. We had 2 car payments, a house payment, and $4,000 saved up.
Yeah.
And I said, I got this idea for a business. Nothing like this really exists, but I see the customer need right now.
Yeah.
And she, of course, was 100% behind it, which is unusual, and I'm eternally grateful
Yeah.
for that. And so I like to joke that I funded the company with VC money, and people think that means venture capital. It meant Visa cards,
Yeah.
because nobody was going to give a 28-year-old guy with no experience money. All
Yeah.
right. So I racked up debt. That's how I funded the company. I'd call on clients, and some would say, why would I even need this? And
Sure.
they ended up becoming some of my biggest and best customers because they didn't know what I knew about what the need was. So I was just a little bit ahead of that, and then was able to deliver
Yeah.
on that. And so that's the simple message of entrepreneurship is, can you serve your customer? Is there a need there? Can you show the customer, look, if you pay me this price, you're going to get more value?
Yeah.
And
Right.
where I see other entrepreneurs go down, they don't pay attention to their core economic. And your core economic is really simple. 2 things. Number one, the price, as I said, has to be at a place where your customer's happy to pay it because they're getting more value than what they're paying you.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
has to be high enough that you can cover your expenses and your profit. And very importantly, make sure you've got enough to fund your runway. And
Yeah.
basically,
Right.
if you can hang in during the tough times, you're going to have a good success. So you've got to watch your expenses,
Yeah.
got to drive your revenue. My business partner, Charles Bracken, and I, we always laugh because people come to us and say, well, how do you start a successful enterprise? We're like, well, you got to make a lot of sales calls. You got to get out there, tell people what you're doing. You've got to call on folks and make proposals, and get your nose bloodied. And a lot of times, okay, well, we got that, but how else can you do it? I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I don't know any other way. It
Yeah.
all starts with a sale, and it all
Right.
starts with delivering a value.
Yeah, and you did something that's interesting to me. You chose healthcare. You learned it. You learned the customer really well. You saw this need in this that was upcoming, and then you weren't scared to educate them. So I see a lot of people like, I want to sell this product or service, but then I have to educate so much on like the need for it, right? And you see this in like the health and fitness world. Like so much of it is educating on why it's even needed.
Yep.
But you knew them so well, you're like, hey, this is coming ahead.
And
Everybody's going to need this.
look, everyone has to decide what kind of company they're going to have.
Yeah.
And long ago, someone wrote a thing called the Tracy model, and there were 3 elements of the Tracy model. And I believe it was: are you going to be low cost? Are you going to be technical innovator? Or are you going to be a customer intimate? We were clearly customer intimate with the ability to deliver. And then you set up your processes and your procedures to make sure you can deliver consistently high quality.
Right.
And everybody understands that the new piece of business from an existing customer is way easier to obtain than going out and winning a new customer.
Right. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
look, people always talk about, well, isn't it risky? Well, there's always risk to be managed.
Yeah.
And you can't turn a blind eye to it. And a lot of it is just anticipating the future. Well, what if?
Yeah.
All right, what if this product ceases to work? And
Yeah.
that actually happened to us.
Sure.
We were serving a product that IBM was trying to sell into the healthcare space, and they did such a poor job with the engineering that they pulled the product from the market. Okay, and now so I had this workforce that was out there implementing this thing at various hospitals around the country.
Yeah.
So what we did is we went to IBM and said, we know how it's broken, and we've got the people that can fix it. And I remember him sitting across from the guy at IBM. IBM's, the biggest
Yeah.
technology company in the world, and he's looking at me like, "You're telling me that you can fix what ails big IBM?" And I'm like, "Sir, in this particular place, I think we can make a difference." So
Yeah.
we ended up working for IBM and
Okay.
building the product.
Yeah.
Okay. And now we knew it so well that when we went to implement it, nobody could touch us.
Right. Yeah. You knew every aspect of even what the competitors were building. Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly. And so, but we didn't stay there because that would have been deadly. And that's what happens to sometimes people will get a formula, right? And, they want to sell Oxford shoes. Well, what happens when people go to a more casual lifestyle? So you
Yeah.
have to understand what is your real core skill. And if your core skill is building a shoe, well, then you build a little different shoe to meet the market demand.
Yeah.
In our case, in this particular business, our core skill was in managing the change at a technical level and a
Yeah.
workflow level.
Right.
And so we looked at all the technologies as just tools to be
Yeah.
used, made sure we could use them. And when we went public, there's a lot of investment in healthcare IT. One of the things we said was that we were like an option on the entire market.
Hmm.
It didn't matter to us if you picked technology A, B, C, D, E, F. As long as someone was selling some of that technology, there was going to be a piece of it for us. Back at that time, at the way technology existed,
Yeah.
today a lot of the labor has been engineered out of it.
Yeah.
Like the app on your phone, right?
Sure.
There's no
One.
business of installing a new app.
Yeah. Right.
People use
Right.
their children and grandchildren to do that
Yeah. Yeah.
for free.
Yeah.
Ice cream, maybe. I don't know.
Right. One thing that stands out to me is that meeting with IBM, and I've heard you talk about this before. I'm just curious, looking back, what you felt, because I've been in a lot of situations where I've been young and had more authority or a better idea or something like that, or even just been new in an industry and thought, these people probably know more than me, and then suddenly I realized like, oh, they don't think about this from in a bigger perspective, and I have an idea I want to share. And that's always challenging for young entrepreneurs. How do you get past that?
Well, it comes back from that core. Are you bringing value? Are
Yeah.
you listening to your customer? So let me contrast that long ago example. I could have gone in there and said, hey, look, I've got a lot of people that I'm paying a salary that are on the bench, and I need to get them busy doing something.
Yeah.
They don't, I mean, why would they care?
Right.
But I knew they wanted to fix this product. They wanted to get the product back on the market. So that's what I went in and talked to them about. Now,
Sure.
you say, how did I feel going into the meeting? I'll tell you this, in countless client meetings, countless, public speeches, constant, investor meetings,
Yeah. Yeah.
I had butterflies going into every one of them.
Sure.
Okay. And, because I wanted to make sure I was prepared,
Hmm.
and that same feeling that, I don't know everything. Nobody can know everything.
Yeah.
But you try to know as much as you can and try to focus in on satisfying the needs of that other person in a way that gets you what you want.
Right.
So, if I'd go and meet with an investor, for example, yeah, I'd like them to buy our stock, or I'd like them to consider an investment in the company, but I want it to be a good return for them. And
Yeah.
so I'd try to explain to them, if you're looking for services, you're not technology dependent.
Hmm.
If you're looking for something that's got repeat revenue, not a lot of recurring revenue, until we got to the outsourcing business,
Yeah.
we're a fit for you.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we knew how to make cash.
Right.
But you
That's
talk
the
about
important
that
part.
risk management is, you got to leave behind what you've got.
Yeah.
And so as an entrepreneur, I know that you understand that, but I've had people say, well, I'm not going to quit my job until I see if this business works. And I'm like, good luck with that, because you never put the time in. And
Yeah.
you also don't want to be reckless. You have to line up, what are all the things that can go wrong, and and what are all the things that can go right. And what I like to do is make sure that I only needed one or two things to go right, and it took 12 things to go wrong in
Yeah.
order to torpedo the business.
Yeah, it's a
Okay?
very like asymmetric bet, right? So
Yes.
you're betting 4,000, and the worst thing that can go wrong is you lose the 4,000. The best thing that can go right is you make 1 million, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And understanding too that, look, lots of things can happen.
Yeah.
Established players can fight back. Okay.
Yeah.
They're going to try to adopt your rules, try to raid your employees, etc. And they're going to not go down quietly. You've got to anticipate that. You have to anticipate technology change. And sometimes the earth just moves out from underneath your feet.
Sure.
And we experienced that. But there was a technology crash in 99, 2000. And
Yeah.
it took a retrenchment. Very difficult, but we were able to pivot the business and get it to a good place. Interesting thing, too, that I'm still in touch with a lot of my colleagues, and the company is still operating today, 38 years later,
Yeah.
39 years later, coming up. And some of the same people are still working there, which is pretty cool.
That's really cool. Yeah, so you get to change not just your own family's lives, but countless families' lives, right?
Exactly, and that's
Yeah.
a very, very big responsibility, is to do everything you can to sustain the business because people depend on you.
Yeah. Let's talk about growing that business. Something I think about a lot in growing my business is in a certain season, what am I optimizing for, right? Am I optimizing for growth? Am I optimizing for profit? Am I optimizing for more time with my family? I just came out of a season where my son was 0 to 1. So I was optimizing for way more time with my family. Now I'm optimizing for growth and profitability. How do you kind of compartmentalize those seasons as an entrepreneur?
Well, I start with the big picture, all right? And for me, it's always been God, family, business in that order.
Yeah.
And I found that when I vary from that, things don't go as well. And when I keep that in mind, that generally there's a better outcome.
Yeah.
And particularly with your family, that your kids are only going to be that age one time. And because of the hours and the travel that I experienced while raising a family, breakfast was going to be the meal that Dad was going to be at
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we didn't know what was going to happen at the end of the day. And if that meant taking a red eye home from the West Coast to be there, then that's what was going to get done. It wasn't every day because there were times there were multiple day trips and so forth.
Sure.
But we had to make that a priority as they got involved with their scouting or being in a play or a square dance at school or athletic event, concerts. Those go in the calendar and don't get moved.
Yeah.
And someone says they want to have a meeting, it's like not going to do that.
I have another meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. When your child looks out at you when they're going to sing in their school concert,
Yeah.
they're looking for your face. There's no substitute
Yeah.
for that. And early on, we were approached by a firm that wanted to acquire us as a fairly young, and I went and had the meetings and listened to them. And the guy had pictures of his kids around the office, and this was even before there was the Palm Pilot. So you're trying to find a meeting, and it's like, well, what about Saturday? And I could see his book was like all business stuff. And then I go, well, no, I'm not going to do Saturday. It was, well, how about Sunday? And he flips open to Sunday, and I like, man, I'm not. That's my day with my family, and I'm just not going to do it. And if you look at entrepreneurs, most of them have that kind of discipline.
Yeah.
Ross Perot, who was a pioneer, actually did pioneer the computer services business. So I closed the briefcase on Friday night, didn't open it again until Sunday night. Lee Iacocca, who was very successful with Chrysler, same thing. And as a result, they had great relationships with their kids and their grandkids.
Yeah.
And your business is going to come and go. Deals are going to come and go. You're never going to remember all of them. They might seem important at the time, but you're going to remember the clever thing that your child said, or the look on their face when they looked up from a sandbox when you took them to the park. You can't replace that time.
Right.
And it's difficult because we tend to be building our businesses and our families at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's,
Right.
And every couple figures out how to do it.
Yeah. The time when opportunities flood in is like the time when you have the second and third kid.
Yeah, and when you have the energy, all right?
Yeah.
And I guarantee
Right.
there's a big difference in when I look back at some of the calendars I used to do, like today, there's just zero chance of that happening.
Yeah.
They'd have to take me out in a gurney probably.
I wear
So,
this like heart rate monitor all the time and like tracks all kinds of stuff.
yeah,
And it,
I'm
it
afraid to
often
do that anymore.
it often tells me like, are you feeling tired lately? And I'm like, no, I feel okay actually.
Internalizing the stress. So,
Yeah.
but I know you asked about risks and, um, you know, lining up, as I said, what can go right, what can go wrong. Um, Understanding that you always have to anticipate the future, what if,
Yeah.
and that way, if that what if occurs, you've already got a plan, and that is so you can sustain the enterprise.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Something that's happening in real estate right now is there's some laws going into place to get rid of the obligation for the seller to pay the buyer's agent commission, which on the forefront, not a big deal. It makes it negotiable. You could always negotiate for the seller to pay it. You could negotiate for the buyer to pay it. You can negotiate for a lower commission. But I think of that what you said about the Tracy model and my own business. Like when you become the customer intimate or the tech innovator or the low cost and you're adding that value so specifically, asking to be compensated is not a hard ask, right?
Right.
It really
Because
changes things.
you're delivering value.
Yeah, but it forces people to deliver value. If you're not, you're not going to last when things change like that.
Yeah. I actually like it because a lot of times in real estate, it's like who can get the listing.
Yeah,
And then, no matter who hustles to find the right buyer for that property, they're going to pick up half the commission.
yeah,
Yeah. And I know there's been, buyer's agents and so forth. So, again, it's an innovation, people have to consider if they want it to work. One of the other things that you had sent me earlier too about building the company, a real important question is, are you going to be the company or are you going to build a company?
yeah, yeah,
Now, in professional services like real estate, like consulting work, you can make a very comfortable living just on your own.
right.
But you can do more, serve more, employ more by building a business.
Yeah,
And that's true if you're bootstrapping the company and just doing it by customer revenue and by savings, or if you're taking an investment. You have to have a plan about, are you going to build one or are you going to be one? And that's going to guide a lot of your decisions.
right. So, looking at my company, it's kind of funny to even call it a company. I feel like it's mostly just a brand at this point. Living in Tampa, this marketing channel for my YouTube business. Most of my deals go through my buyer's agents at this point. And how do I build a company when my face and voice and intuition is such an intimate part of the brand and what the brand promises to deliver, right?
Yeah, you have to do it methodically, and part of it is building a culture to reflect you.
Yeah.
And people talk a lot about corporate culture, and you're going to get a culture either by design or it's just going to happen as you hire people.
Yeah.
And a culture really is just a code. It's beliefs and conduct. Who are we?
Yeah.
And it's important that they're written down. It's important that they're taught. It's important that they're in every piece of the business, and that they're lived every day. And I've seen plenty of companies say, well, we're going to have culture, and they hire a culture consultant and they do PowerPoints and whatever. And then the leadership doesn't follow the things they say. And people see right through that. They go, that's not sincere. So building a brand beyond yourself is the first acknowledgement that you can't do every job.
Yeah.
All right. If you're going to build something that a lot of like the time you spend doing accounting today, if you build a company, that becomes at least another person and then another department. And so my longtime CFO and my current business partner in real estate, Jim House, he was really the first full-time professional hire for accounting, and he built the entire department.
Yeah.
But he knew what the culture was.
Yeah.
And Charles Bracken, who was the amazing rainmaker and number 2 guy in the company, we had a shared sense of values that we lived, and we were shoulder to shoulder for 20 years in getting that culture out. Because, for example, when we went public, I'm the one going and calling on investors, and Charles is out making rain with big clients and doing speaking and getting people excited on that front. You can't be in 2 places at one time. But the unifying piece is the culture.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you don't define it, don't write it, don't teach it, don't live it, don't push it every day, you can see what would happen.
Yeah.
And these couple of examples, Jim could go off and treat the employees in accounting differently than what our values said. Mm-hmm. And who knows what Charles could have been saying to a client or to an industry group. But because we were unified around the culture, we were able to come forward with a consistent message.
Yeah. What were some of the things
I mean,
in
it's
that
define
culture?
who you are and define what your boundaries are. And,
Yeah.
We had rules like, the top rule, top superior principle was keep your client's interest first.
Yeah.
Okay. Serve your client.
That's great.
All right. We had another one called every decision's based on the 3 C's: the client, the colleague, and the company. So you're empowering thousands of people to make decisions on your behalf. Teach them how to make good decisions. Is it good for the client? Is it good for the colleagues we have involved? Is it good for the company?
Right.
Okay. It's that simple, but you got to keep hammering that point home.
Yeah. And it's one thing for me to communicate those values in a video. It's another thing for me to train employees how to implement those values, and all those things have to be there. So in videos, I'm showing that I can be trusted, that I have my client's best interest in mind.
Yes.
And that I sell houses. Like, I don't have to show that I'm the best, but in this context, I'm just trying to show those 3 things. And I typically do that through some kind of story. I can tell a story about a client. Rich reached out to me. This is what they were looking for. This is kind of where we landed. And so I'm just demonstrating all those things, right?
Well, I think yours goes beyond that. And when I think about how you and I connected, we were considering a winter home in Florida.
Yeah.
And we used to have condominiums in Pinellas County, had been spending time out west during the cold months. And all right, what's going on in Florida? So we go on good old YouTube, and here's living in Tampa. Oh, here's great. And there's value added there.
Right.
And so in your videos, you demonstrate the area. What's the shopping like? What's the traffic like? What kind of homes can you buy in that area? What can you expect to spend? When you move to Florida, here's some things you need to be thinking about. All value added. At the end, by the way, I'm in the real estate business. I'm like, I want a guy that knows the area, that knows the ins and outs, and understands that is going to be serving a customer that doesn't know those things.
Right. Yeah.
So one of the things in your corporate culture would probably be educate your client.
Yeah.
Meet them where they're at. And, and like we have now a flood of people coming from New York, from Chicago. And I was just in a luncheon yesterday where the speaker was the former lieutenant governor of the state of Michigan, and Michigan's population is moving to Florida in a
Yeah.
significant measure. Not
Yeah.
everybody, but people like to retire there. But it's also the other end
Yeah.
of the scale where there's younger folks that are going to Florida,
Yeah.
and they don't know what to expect.
Sure.
Florida's got 4 months that it's completely awesome. Well, what's it like in the other 8 months?
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
and there's a big difference between Tampa and Sarasota and Naples and West Palm Beach and Miami and Fort Lauderdale and
Yeah.
Jacksonville and Orlando and the
Right.
Keys. And I think you do a great job of
I appreciate
explaining
that.
that to people.
Yeah.
And then even within the Tampa Bay area, when you drill down, what's it like to be up in Pasco County?
Yeah.
What's it like to be on the beaches? I mean,
Right.
I obviously am a big fan of your videos, and everybody
Yeah.
should
I
be
love
for
it.
that matter.
I had a Zoom call with someone last night. She grew up in Puerto Rico. She currently lives in Japan, and they're looking to move back to the States. I mean, how else would I find a client like that, right?
Right. They find you because
Yeah.
you're giving them value.
Right. And it was so fun to talk to her. She's like, we have this list of things. I'm like, well, tell me the list. I want to see if I would even recommend Tampa. So I want to have that conversation because to me, I'm also like harvesting stories for
Yes.
for the next video too.
Yep.
But
Yeah,
it's so fun.
and that would be
to,
like a
like, find
great
those people.
story.
Yeah.
Actually, it would be. I listened and said they probably want to look at the other coast.
Yeah. Right.
It could be, but Tampa's got a great location. It's got a great climate, lots of choices, fantastic
It does, yeah.
airport. There's a lot to like about the Tampa Bay area. Got pro
Yeah,
sports
I agree.
now.
Yeah.
So
Orlando's trying to steal our baseball team though.
yeah, well, they've been after that for a long time.
Yeah.
But I was a charter season ticket holder for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they're still my favorite number. They're my second favorite team in the NHL.
Yeah.
And then the Devil Rays are, or I guess they're just the Rays now.
I wish
That's
it was
always
Devil
been
Rays.
a
I think that was
challenge.
fun.
Yeah, it's always been a challenge there. Of course, Orlando's not getting the Buccaneers.
No, they're definitely not. Okay, I want to talk about the Common Bridge with Rich Helppie, this podcast
Okay.
you started. Something you've said about it a few times, and something I pulled from it. You often talk about like what the brand promises, and you're still away from running this bigger business, but you're still implementing this culture. You're still creating a brand promise. And what is it? What is this new project, and what does it promise as a brand?
Well, the brand promise is that there's something for everybody to not like in every episode. And that's because when I looked at the established players, you can see that we have the political system is not delivering the way people want it to deliver. They're supposed to be our elected representatives, and they've devolved into this kind of tribalism, and they're aided and abetted by the established media complex.
Yeah.
And the established media complex is really just in league with the partisan division to try to keep people angry and scared so that they'll tune in again tomorrow. And we need to get back to having our elected representatives work on the problems that are important to us, compromise, and come up with better policy solutions.
Yeah.
And it used to be that the Fourth Estate, the reporting, would hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And would call out corruption where they found it. And now we are so divided that, by design, by the way, that slices of the audience are directed to a certain set of things.
Yeah.
That they catch somebody doing something red-handed, well, that's our guy. We're not going to say anything about it. And yet, if the other side does it, it's like the end of the world. And people can see through that.
Yeah.
So I started the Common Bridge more to inform than to influence, because it is apparent to me that there's good people out there doing good things. There's good policy ideas. but we're not getting the attention of the political class to implement those policy changes because there's no public demand for it.
Yeah.
And people are silly enough to think, well, if my side wins, everything's going to be great.
Right.
Really? So look at the 2016 election. It didn't go the way, 50% of the country wanted it to go. There were riots in the streets. Washington, D.C. was trashed.
Yeah.
Look at 2020. Didn't like the way the election came out. We had the Capitol invaded. All right. And it's egged on by the established media complex. And everybody knows they're lying. Everybody knows they're leaving things out in order to inflame their audience. But they're comforted going to the place that inflames them in their chosen manner.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just this morning, I had a conversation with somebody very close to me who was very upset about, what's going on at the border. And my challenge was, look, think about your own personal experiences, not that thing that you got fed on the internet with a video. What do you know about the many migrants that have come across? They're hardworking, trying to get a toehold just like our ancestors did, really, by and large, want to come here to work and build a life. Yeah. But people are being whipped into this frenzy in order to scare them, because why does this media complex have to rely on fear? It's real simple. You can't take your eyes off of a threat.
Yeah, you can't.
Okay, so that's now become the business model. Yeah. And people are fraught with anxiety. I was in a meeting, we're considering going to a new church, and the pastor was talking in a small group, said, we're really divided and angry. And I said, I don't think so. And I said, where are you seeing it other than on your TV screen or on your internet feed?
Are you actually feeling it among your peers, among your community?
Yeah. And when you stop and put gas in your car, or you go to the grocery store, you get a restaurant meal, you walk down the street, is that what you're feeling? It's like, well, no. That's not reality. It's a corrupted view done for nefarious purposes to sell us stuff, control us, and to keep us turned away from the awesome things that happen every day in this country that's full of generous and compassionate people.
Yeah.
So a frequent question I get is, well, how do we stop this? Quit buying it.
Yeah.
Turn off the channels that are inflaming you.
Yeah.
Okay? And I wish in some respects I hadn't started this, because now it's part of my job. I got to watch it, right? Yeah. And I have to read it.
Yeah.
And so, for example, I'll pick on the New York Times for a moment. Their technique is to feign like they're reporting something and just leave out some key data.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, that really sets the whole tone. Right? And you look at what's been discovered, like that's going on with Twitter. And, folks will go, well, that couldn't have been, Biden wasn't in the government. It's like, please. The guy was out of the government, like, over the course of 50 years for like 5 months. Or I don't know. Some time he left the vice presidency till he declared as a president. It was a matter of months. Maybe it was 20 months. Whatever it was.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's been in the government since he was a very young man.
Yeah.
Okay? And people excusing the utter unfitness of Donald Trump for the Oval Office. Okay? We've seen this movie before, right? He's not a disciplined guy, got massive personal issues, and his whole drive seems to be, I want to stick it to these people. I'm like, that's, not the right thing. Now, and in between that, though, he's peppered it saying, here's what I would do with the Ukraine, with the border, with the economy, with energy. And people go, yeah, I want that.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's okay to want that. Those are policies that are debatable, but we can get that with a competent executive that doesn't need a therapist couch.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was the
And
question? Oh, the common bridge. So the common bridge
no.
is fiercely nonpartisan,
Yeah.
policy-oriented discussion, with people that know their material. And occasionally my producer will ambush me and say, I'm turning on the camera. I'm going to read you comments and letters we get.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I respond to those, and never sure if that's helping. They're really widely accepted, and our audience goes higher. Although I can't
Oh, yeah.
help but think I'm driving audience away because I'm just unvarnished.
No, that community engagement, like that feeling of if I ask something or say something, it might be talked about, even if this person disagrees with it.
Yeah.
They're not like attacking me because I asked the question or made the comment. They're just like, no, like this, maybe I'm missing some data, and this person's going to show me.
Yeah, right. Exactly right. Like what's going on with infrastructure. And so we had Professor Rick Geddes from Cornell on, and you've had him on a couple times, and the guy's brilliant. He's also an expert on the post office. We had him in talking about the post office. I mean, like, oh, this all makes sense now.
Yeah.
But I asked him about do we have the people to do the infrastructure? And I was kind of cringing, thinking he's going to say, no, we don't have enough civil engineers and stuff. He goes, oh, absolutely. He's like, we got the best materials engineers. We got the best civil engineers. We can do infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's not insurmountable at all.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And we've covered a lot of healthcare. We've covered a lot of COVID with people that are actually doing the work.
Of course. You say that the goal is to inform and not influence, but there is one way that you influence very strongly with this podcast. You influence people to think.
Oh, I hope so.
Think and read and kind of escape from this like binary thinking, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't want to do it though.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I'll be called like a left-wing bleeding heart, and I'll be called a right-wing neocon Nazi on the same episode.
On the same episode.
And a lot of times you can tell people haven't even actually listened or watched or read the episode. They just saw the headline. And then they go, like I did one on education, is the current one. I don't know when this program's going to air, but and somebody jumped on it about ESG, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem with education. Well, I'd encourage people to listen to what Ernestine Sanders has done with the Cornerstone schools. And it's inarguable. We're going to meet a child where they are. We're going to supplement their skills so they can read, so they can do computation, so they can speak, so they have a great chance at a future.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, not rocket science.
Yeah, and I love that you just like bring in more things. It's like, no, this isn't a simple thing. This is a complex thing, but you can still understand it.
Yeah. And well, because this is the thing, they want to get things down to sound bites.
Yeah.
Right?
Tweets.
Like, look at policing. All right. We had some time ago the sheriff of Washtenaw County on, and after the show, he said he really appreciated being on. He says, I usually get 30 or 40 seconds for a sound bite versus being able to explain the nuance of what they contend with. And it was a great conversation. Now, one of the challenges I'm facing right now is it's difficult to get people who are really invested in a point of view. That we've gone so far along this path of deplatforming that, well, we don't like what that guy's saying, so we're going to make him a non-person. And the really crazy and dangerous thing about that is if you think, oh, I'm going to deplatform that guy, guess what? You may not be next, but eventually it'll be you.
Right.
Because that's what happens to all totalitarian states is that they turn on the most loyal.
Right.
Witness the number of people close to Vladimir Putin who have mysteriously fallen from high windows of late.
Yeah.
They aren't the peripheral players.
No.
Okay, look at Saddam Hussein, okay, who was said to get up out of a meeting, ask someone to go in the hall and shoot him in the head.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you think that by mouthing the right words and saying the right things and trying to shut down other people is going to protect you, oh no, you're just seen as a useful idiot and a tool, and eventually we're going to take you out.
Yeah.
So that's why I encourage people, get facts. What's the policy? Okay, hold people accountable, even if you love the president, the senator, the congressional representative, the governor, the attorney general you have, even if you love them, you think they're a wonderful person, insist that they implement sensible policies.
Right.
Don't let them get away with it.
I love it. You're empowering people. And this brand, it really does what it says. I love it for you.
Well, I appreciate you listening in. It's called The Common Bridge. We're on Substack now.
Yeah, that's right.
And part of it is that I think there's less chance of getting deplatformed.
Yeah.
Because an extremist would say at the current rate, you only are going to get to say a particular set of things. And there's already lots of media outlets that are like that.
Yeah, right.
And folks know it, but folks will still go there because they just feel comfortable there.
Right.
And they think if they hate on one side enough, that makes them a better person. And I've never seen hate do anything but consume the vessel that tries to contain it.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll link to everything, the podcast and the Substack. I'd love for anybody to check it out and hear what they think. But I want to be selfish for a few more minutes and talk about myself and my business because I want your input.
I have to say that you got a great business model, and and again, you're doing the one thing most people don't want to do. You work hard.
I do, and I like it. But I feel like the model is so contrarian to those around me in the real estate industry. Mm-hmm. The typical person like me would just say, oh, I'm good at generating leads, so I'm going to start the Sam Cottle team. Then I'm going to take, 60% of that commission, and then every other deal that agent does, I'm going to take 50%, and they're just going to be my employee, and they're going to, maybe make $150,000 in a really good year, and they'll be happy. I don't love that. All kinds of reasons. I don't want to run team meetings. I don't want my clients to be expected by other people. There's all kinds of dynamics, some freedom that I want in the midst of that. So what I'm trying to build just feels different. And I don't have an example around me, so I'm always taking little pieces from other industries or from other people and trying to kind of make my Frankenstein's monster of a business as I go. And I'm just realizing there's no shortcuts, right?
That's right.
I just have to figure it out as I go. Even as I'm saying it, I'm like, I don't want him to even give me an answer because I need to just figure it out for myself.
Well, you're on the right track in that the industry that you're in is well established.
Yeah.
There are people that have done really well, and so they have no desire to make any changes, okay, unless and until kind of forced into it. And a great example would be that it was a day not too long ago that a person couldn't go online and find the real estate listings.
Yeah.
You had to go through a realtor, and they served you up what they wanted to serve up. Well, Redfin and Zillow and other sites, now you can see what's going on in the market, a more informed consumer.
Right.
And I would encourage you, continue your value-added model, and whether you try to do it on your own or you bring in like-minded people, it's really immaterial.
Yeah.
But I hear you loud and clear. You don't want to just follow that established path because you think it's got defined limits and it's got caps, and that's 100% true.
Yeah, and it defines roles, like what a team leader does, what a buyer's agent does, what a listing agent does. If you're adding so much value and you are very customer focused, like you can be all those things at the same time, and you don't need to fit in these buckets.
Well, remember at one time, that type of thinking was very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
because it changed whatever it was before that.
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
that's,
Yeah. That's
again, the
helpful.
beauty of capitalism. It's creative destruction.
I
Is
wrote that
that,
down when you said it.
yeah, it's the beauty of capitalism. We're going to find a way to do something better.
Yeah. And like leave
And
everything behind.
exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're good, and if it works, then that becomes the new status quo.
Yeah.
And now, well, everybody does that.
Sure.
I was walking the floor of a convention, and a young salesperson uh, came over and was pitching me about how her company was set up and how it worked and whatever like that. And it was basically giving me the business model that I had invented, 20 years before.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now that's the way things are done.
Sure.
So these are the types of things that we have to become accustomed to. Look at, by way of example, rideshare.
Yeah.
Okay, and the taxi cab industry fought that. But now go back, what's happened in hired carriages? Well, there were livery services, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you had to go to a place to get that ride.
Yeah.
Well, then there was this new breakthrough innovation called the radio. And you could call and they would radio, the car would come to you. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa, you didn't have to go to the cab stand. And then this bureaucracy got built up around it. And then here along comes Uber and says, there's these cars out there and we've got these apps
Yeah.
and we know where you are and we know where the cars are. We'll just disintermediate. And remember how hard the taxi companies fought back.
Right.
But now most major cities, you can go on the Uber app and get a taxi, or there is a local taxi app.
Right.
Forcing the old established groups to make a change, that's when you really know you're successful.
Yeah.
And I liken it to sports. How do you know a player is an impact player? It's when the opponent has to change the way they play because that athlete's on the field or on the court.
Yeah. Another big brokerage, one of the big kind of old school ones, reached out to me recently through a marketing company. They hired this marketing company to do this campaign. They reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you want to be like an actor in this campaign?" And it's one of the big brokerages everyone would know that I'm not a part of. And they're like, "Can you do this like campaign for us on TikTok?" And I'm like, "No." I'm like, I get it. I see what you're trying to do, and I feel like I'm a few steps ahead of that, and I'm just gonna like take that as a cue of like, no, I'm going in the right direction.
Yeah, and look, if your innovations start to become more mainstream, then the business schools will codify that. They'll teach people how to do that. And like now there are schools for entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And they do a pretty good job. And some people would tell you, no, you're either born with it or not. I don't think so. I think you can teach it. If people have the energy and the willingness to learn, and the attitude to let go of the place that they're successful today.
Yeah.
And that's,
That's
throughout the history of humankind,
Yeah.
the people that don't want to change are the people that are doing pretty good in the current system.
Yeah. Yeah. So whenever we moved to Florida, that's when I got into real estate. It was like we moved, and I thought, okay, how am I going to find clients? Eventually came across this idea of like, oh, I can just be a student of the area and just share my experience. I don't even have to say I'm new to real estate. And I found
That's
out
right.
people didn't really care anyway. They liked me, and then they liked the value I was adding, so they called.
Yep.
But I left a very comfortable, like, they asked me to stay as I was leaving, and offered me a big promotion, So I left opportunity that was very, measured and capped and those kind of things to take a risk. And it felt pretty calculated to me. Like, the downside's not that intense. Like, I could go find a job if I need to. But something that stands out to me, and I think this is something that's important to me in entrepreneurship, is attaining new skills. Now, if I needed to go find a job, I wouldn't even talk about all of that, like internal auditing and travel I did. I would talk about building a brand through video. Like that's my new marketable skill that I developed on my own, and it's something I would show if I needed to get a job. And that, like, constant skill acquisition, I think, is something that's so important for young entrepreneurs. What do you think about that?
Well, I think you said the key is you discovered who you are and what satisfies you
Yeah.
intellectually, emotionally, psychologically. And, we're all built a little different. And I'm very grateful that there are people that say, look, I love doing internal audit work. I
Yeah, me
love
too.
the measurement of it. I like that, my hours are controlled, and I like someone else's, setting it out and saying, do this scope here. There are folks that their relationship with the work world is, hey, I go in, I put in an honest day's work, and then I go home to my life.
Hmm.
And that's fabulous.
Yeah.
And so some people are cut out to be musicians and artists, and others accountants, and others homemakers, and
Yeah.
others that want to do landscaping or physical work, and some are cut out to be entrepreneurs. And not everybody can be a artist. I mean, I'd be a horrible artist. Or I'd have no skills there. And entrepreneurs is a thing that resonated with me.
Yeah.
And as one of our, several of us around one time talking to a guy as a business consultant, who's also there in Tampa, Jim Kacholka, and he said, you know why you business guys work all the time? And we're like, oh, we're going to get something. We're all leaning in, and he goes, because you suck at everything else.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right. I go, all right, yeah, okay, guilty as charged,
Yeah.
right? So if you're fortunate enough to do something you like, and you're rolling out of bed, and you're like, I'm excited to try the new idea,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you're in the right place.
Right.
And if you're rolling out of bed and you're frustrated and you feel locked down and you feel like you're in the wrong place, then you've got to find that next new place
Yeah.
as you go. But I'm sure, look, I've talked to folks of your demographic, and a lot of them got it backward, in my opinion. It's, I'm not going to do anything until I find the exact thing.
Yeah.
Well,
You'll
good
find the
luck with,
thing once you try anything.
yeah. And I'm of the mind, ambition starts with discomfort.
Yeah.
Okay, that you don't like. In my case, I did not like working for other people. Just it didn't fit me.
Yeah.
But other people like that.
Right.
I leaving the Dorito line for a chance with computer systems, that was an easy decision.
Sure.
Very hot inside a Frito factory,
I
and
bet.
and sweaty, and you lift heavy things, and
Yeah.
you go home smelling like a Dorito. And by the way, they're delicious, and the cleanliness in the plants, nothing to worry about that I ever saw.
Nice.
So they do a nice job.
Yeah.
It's just that I could go to work and do something like write computer code that I would have done for free anyway,
Yeah.
and get paid to do it. It's
Right.
pretty good.
My mom is a very talented artist. So as a kid, I saw her, do giant murals on buildings, or calligraphy for wedding invitations, or even she can even just like knit anything, or like
Wow.
anything like that she can do, paint, whatever. Even when I was a kid, at restaurants, when we could, like, kids get antsy at restaurants, she would draw us these little picture puzzles on the napkins, and it
Oh,
was like
wow.
a picture plus another picture plus an action plus ER equals what, and we'd have to solve it. So I reached a point as an adolescent where I'm like, I'm not creative like she is. And so I feel like I'm not creative. But I eventually realized, no, my creativity is this business expression.
Yes.
And it's me looking at the
Yes.
landscape and seeing, like, where do I fit in, and how do I think differently? And then how do I use that as an advantage? So I would, argue that you are an artist in your own way.
Yeah, I used to say that my business is my art.
Yeah.
I did other things beyond this company, and most of them worked out pretty well. But again, I'd come back to, my values: God, family, business,
Yeah.
and work hard. There's no substitute for hard work. There's no substitute for serving a client. There's no substitute for watching your core economics. And there's no substitute for just serving the people that are in your employ. And
Yeah.
if you do those things, the numbers will follow.
Right.
And that's where a lot of people are. They have the misconception that there's some people want to be greedy or hurtful to other people. And I've dealt with lots of CEOs and lots of entrepreneurs, and all of them are just passionate about doing the right thing. You
Yeah.
know, and people that try to like do something quote for the money,
Yeah.
they typically end up not very happy.
Sure.
So there's that. Sam, you've got a great business. So what else should we talk about before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I wanted to just tell a story about a client, and it just proves to me that honesty, so working with clients is one thing, like doing it like really well, but also just being really honest with clients. So I get overloaded. I take on a couple clients at a time, and my buyer's agents work with 40 clients at a time.
Yeah.
So I have like three at a time. This one guy, I just dropped the ball. I didn't go see this house he wanted me to go see for him, and I'm like, hey David, I'm sorry. This is my fault. I literally just dropped the ball. I need to connect you with my buyer's agent. He'll reach out to you today. He did. This guy was mad at me. And then my buyer's agent started working with him, reaching out to him every week. Didn't hear from him for a few months. Then he reached out a couple days ago. He's like, hey, can you go see this house for me? So my agent, under contract. So even when it feels like it's hard to like do that right thing, right? You know what the right thing is, like, but it just pays off because it's what the brand represents. Like I care more about the reputation of the brand than I do about making a few $1,000s on this deal. Like that's just not that big of a deal because the brand will live on in the midst of the business. The reputation will live on in the midst of the business, and how we all like sleep at night is so important.
Well, you're 100% correct. And the risk of two entrepreneurs swapping stories means it could go on forever. But I'll tell you
Yeah.
two quick ones about this. So we had a client of good standing that we got a lot of repeat business, just, almost no bid. And it was a substantial piece of work. And it actually elevated into my desk. And I said, we shouldn't be doing this. And because it's not necessary. And I remember talking to the client. He says, this is a substantial piece of work for you guys. Do you understand? I said, yeah. I go, I know that. Okay. But I also know you shouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, in 6 months or 8 months, you're going to know it wasn't necessary. And you're going to know that I knew it. And you're going to be mad at me.
Yeah.
So I don't think you should do this now.
Yeah.
That client became an even bigger client because we looked at their interest.
Right.
And so, for example, if you sell someone a house that's prone to flooding and you don't tell them, versus I know you love that house. I know it's got everything you've got in it, but you know what? I don't think you're going to be happy. And it's in a flood zone, and
Yeah.
I don't want you looking for me in 2 years.
Right.
And then the second quick story I'll tell you is that we had a client of good standing, and frankly, we stepped in it. Okay, we messed up. And we rallied everything to make it right. And I went back to him. I said, how are we now? He goes, I was always impressed with you guys. And when you had a problem, the way you went after it, he says, I'm more impressed today.
Yeah.
So there's a time when if you've made an honest mistake, you fall on your sword, you make it right, and hope for the best outcome. And again, that comes back to that culture. Well, the principle was keep your client's interest first.
Right.
And and if you do that, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I've documented for our team, one of our promises to clients is that we communicate the potential downside of every transaction.
Yep.
Because people moving here across the country are putting so much trust in us.
Yes, indeed.
And we have to just say like, hey, this might not be a big deal to you, but this is a thing. So we have to just provide the information and not even apologize for it, right? We don't.
Right.
I don't want to gloss over it and make it positive. And that's another one of the status quos in the industry that I'm passionate about changing. Real estate agents are often viewed as like used car salesmen, and I think it's so different. If you add enough value, it's so different.
Yeah, exactly. And again, keep your client's interest first, share with them the knowledge, and good things will happen.
Yeah.
and if they don't, like I don't know if you read, there's a recent story in ProPublica about one of these groups that says we buy ugly houses,
Yeah, yeah,
okay, and that they got allegedly they were taking advantage of elderly people,
sure.
and that's not a good way to make your living.
No.
Okay, so it makes a great read.
Yeah, yeah, I'll read that. Well, Rich, thank you so much for joining us. The next episode of Unemployable, I'll do a solo episode just sharing a lot of my company beliefs, the company culture that I'm trying to build. And on this platform, I like to share stuff while it's in process. It's not a promise that everything's going to be polished, but it's a promise that it's going to be shared. And I think that's part of the journey of an entrepreneur is just being on the journey and realizing I'm probably never going to get to the finish line because it's about all of
No,
it. There's no finish line.
there isn't one.
No. Well, thank you so much, Rich, for joining us. And all of Rich's projects will be linked down below in the description, wherever you're listening or watching. Thanks again,
Great.
Rich.
Sam, good to see you, and best of luck as you pursue your entrepreneurial dreams.
Awesome.